Welcome to Utano Podcast. Let's talk about health in Africa. The podcast which tackles tough health questions from an African perspective and spotlights Africa's leadership in public health. For too long, African patients have had to wait for years, decades even, to access breakthrough treatments that are already available in some parts of the world. But that's actually changing. With lenacapavir, a revolutionary long-acting HIV preventive medication, which has been approved by the US FDA, EMA, the European Medicines Agency, and now by the South African Health Product Regulatory Authority with WHO pre-qualification, opening the door for wider access across the African continent. To put this into context, in South Africa alone, we have almost 8 million people who are living with HIV, and women continue to bear the brunt of new HIV infections. Particularly young women and adolescent girls account for over a third of new infections, making this milestone by SAHPRA especially important. I am Lenias, Hwenda, and today I am sitting down with Dr. Boitumelo Semete Makokotlela, the CEO of the South African Health Product Regulatory Authority, to explore what this breakthrough means for South Africa and for Africa's health future. Dr. Makokotlela, lenacapavir registration represents both a scientific breakthrough and a regulatory breakthrough. From your perspective, what does this milestone say about South Africa's growing role in shaping the global health regulatory landscape and in accelerating access to life-saving innovations in South Africa and in Africa?
Sure. Thank you for having SAHPRA on the podcast. So, South Africa's role is quite pivotal actually in this trial, and it doesn't only start with this regulatory decision that we've made. It started when we authorized the trials that took place in South Africa, because it enabled us to evaluate the safety of the drug as well as its efficacy in our population groups through the purpose studies. And so there was pivotal data that was generated in South Africa, which then says that from a clinical trial perspective, from a research perspective, we have the best knowledge one could generate around this drug and the data generated. The second point for us is obviously being able to be the third regulatory authority in the world to authorize this drug for pre-exposure prophylaxis. We did participate with the European Medicines Agency and WHO as part of this scientific review. But again, just being able to, as a regulator, authorize this drug. We got the dossier in March of this year, and by end of October now, we're able to make a regulatory decision. So that is certainly a landmark for us as SAHPRA.
So South Africa showing leadership not just in the regulatory evaluation and market authorization of this product, but actually going back to the clinical trials. We, in fact, just had Professor Ntusi, Ntobeko Ntusi, the president and CEO of the South African Medical Research Council, and last week, and he was just talking about South Africa's leadership in clinical trials and how that actually impacts what happens here in Africa and around the world. Tell us a little bit more from your perspective, the South Africa's role in clinical trials.
Yeah, we play an important role as a country. And I think that there's fundamental factors such as just the disease burden that we have, in that it does make it a country that innovators would want to evaluate the products in. But also, I was in a conversation a few weeks ago where someone was indicating that for some of the non-communicable diseases or some of the cancers, again, because we don't have a number of some of the therapies available in country, when someone comes with a game-changing technology, they're able to trial it here in South Africa.
Yes.
And thirdly, it's around just the clinical trial expertise we have in the country, that we have quite a large number of institutions that are able to conduct world-class clinical trials, wherein the data that emanates from there can be trusted by the world. And for me, those are some of the elements of a successful clinical trial sector. One of the areas that we will be issuing a guideline around very soon is what we call first in human studies. So typically South Africa, we would participate in phase 2 or phase 3 studies, but more and more people are looking at the country for phase 1 studies. So this is where you test the safety of the product. And again, we will then have the capability in country. And also this will enable some of our innovators in the country to be able to conduct these first in human studies.
Yes, clearly a very attractive environment for clinical studies. Now, SAHPRA being the third regulator in the world to approve this breakthrough, most promising preventive therapy for HIV, this can be described as a real game changer. What makes this moment so significant, for you, for South Africa, and for the global fight against HIV?
I mean, what makes it significant is that, for the longest of time, globally, African regulators were deemed to not have the capacity to be able to make such groundbreaking decisions. Because to be able to do this, you need technical expertise that would look at the safety, the quality, and efficacy of the drug. And what this demonstrates is that South Africa does have these expertise. And the fact that our colleagues participated in the EU M4All mechanism, again, demonstrates that we can be sitting in an evaluation with some of the well-resourced and some of the really global experts on a subject matter, that there are areas where we can be on par with some of the more established regulatory authorities, so to say. And so it's a demonstration that while the capability is limited, the capability is there.
Now, this approval came through a unique collaboration between SAHPRA and the European Medicines Agency's EU M4All, Medicines for All initiative. Can you walk us through how that partnership worked in practice, and why it's such an important model for speeding up access to vital innovative therapies such as this one?
Sure. No, I mean, it's absolutely an important model. And this is a model that the EU put in place many years ago to say they're willing to avail their technical experts to evaluate drugs that may not be of priority in their market, but support then those countries where the drugs are priority. And so this mechanism was put in place, as I say, many years ago. And what it does, it puts into a virtual room, experts from the European Medicine Agency, but also from the country that needs this drug. And they're able to jointly, review the product. Yes, the bulk of the communication with the applicant comes through the European Medicine Agency because they are the receiving entity. But then we have sight to, the discussions that are held. We have sight of the questions, and we look at the responses together with their assessors. So it's really a collaborative review mechanism, so that by the time they issue a scientific opinion, as a regulator, you've at least participated in that, and you are confident with the safety and the efficacy of that product.
Shared responsibility indeed. Now, South Africa continues to face one of the highest burden of HIV globally. How do you see lenacapavir transforming prevention strategies, the box of tools that you have for prevention? And what steps is SAHPRA and the Department of Health taking to ensure that people who need this product the most, women and girls accounting for a third of all new infections, that it can benefit them quickly and safely?
I mean, our role was really to ensure that we authorize this drug and make it available in the quickest amount of time possible, so that we're not left out. And this is game changing in a way that, I mean, if you look at the COVID vaccines, Africa got them much, much later. Yes. And yet with this drug, it will be rolled out from next year, in essence. So the timelines have really accelerated. And I think there's an appreciation of the need to ensure that those population groups that need these therapies the most can access them in the quickest amount of time. One of the stats that I've seen through some of the modeling data that was done to look at the long-term impact of lenacapavir in terms of new HIV infections is a stat that says the projection is that in 10 years' time, if lenacapavir is rolled out adequately in these high-risk groups, it could lead to about a 21% reduction in the incidence of new HIV cases. I mean, that is significant. Yes. Because, if you can reduce the number of new infections, it means that then you're getting to a point where you will start to slowly eliminate the disease. And so that's really the intention. So the modeling data is certainly looking positive. And then in terms of the rollout, we're not particularly involved as SAHPRA, but my understanding is that certainly the high-risk population groups are going to be the target group for the initial phase of the rollout with these doses that will be coming through from the Global Fund support that the government received.
So this kind of international collaboration, it's often talked about as the future of regulation, that regulators around the world really cannot work in silos. There's a need to work together. But it's actually quite rare to actually see it in action in the way that we have seen SAHPRA and the European Medicines Agency working together to rapidly approve a much needed product of such significance that allows us to start thinking about even eliminate new infections in South Africa and in Africa. What lessons can SAHPRA take from this process that could help us to reimagine how future life-saving products such as this one could be evaluated, approved across the continent? And do you see this changing how other life-saving treatments that could come after this particular breakthrough, how they are approved and reviewed across Africa?
So is the WHO, they do the pre-qualification. So if a product is pre-qualified before we can have it, we rely on that approach. But also there are regulators that have come together and we're in discussions with them, and being able to evaluate lenacapavir in this way, being able to participate in this collaborative report review basically also sends a message to these regulators that SAHPRA has the capability, SAHPRA has the know-how, because you do want to be invited into these platforms, right? Because it certainly is extremely beneficial for you as a regulator, but it sends a very strong message about the confidence that other regulators have in you as a national regulatory authority.
Yes, so collaboration is the future indeed. Now, what role do you see or envision SAHPRA playing in driving a more agile, a more connected, responsive, collaborative, inclusive global regulatory ecosystem, and of course, the African one that we are trying to build through the African Medicines Agency?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we see ourselves being able to do is to provide our scientific capability and make it available to others, because others have done the same for us. That's why we can end up at this point.
Yes.
We also, on the continent, we've entered into an MOU for us, the 8, and now it will be 9, among 3 countries where we say we can rely on each other. And looking at Zazibona, for example, which is a collaborative review, it's made some really good gains. And so our view is that as we become more exposed to these international collaborative review platforms, we're then able to bring those best practices into our African collaborative review mechanism so that they are equally trusted.
Yes, that's really encouraging and very exciting also to see regulatory leadership from the African continent shaping global practices to make sure that people have timely access to vital treatments that they need. Now, to finish up, Dr. Makokotlela, what people in South Africa will obviously want to know is that the product now, lenacapavir, for HIV pre-exposure prophylaxis, has been approved very quickly. And so does the rapid approval change the timelines for when people are likely to start receiving the product? I know that's really not in your jurisdiction, but do you think people can expect to already start receiving this product before end of 2025, or does the April 2026 timeline that we have seen before still apply?
Yeah, the first quarter of 2026, people will be accessing this game-changing drug.
Yes, so you continue to push the boundaries from the milestones that SAHPRA achieved with the rolling reviews of COVID vaccines, and now you have been able to do this even faster. So who knows what comes in the future? Dr. Semete Makokotlela, thank you so much for coming on to Utano Podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
SAHPRA's approval of lenacapavir is a great milestone, one that underscores the power of collaboration between pharmaceutical companies and regulators from across continents. It's an excellent example of how collaborative processes such as this one can accelerate the path from scientific innovation to real-world impact. Lenacapavir's registration is a triumph of partnership, proving that when expertise and purpose align, you can transform lives a lot sooner than we have been able to do before. Stay tuned for more conversations that spotlight Africa's leadership and innovation in public health, only on Let's Talk About Health in Africa. Until next time, I'm Lenias, Hwenda. Thank you for watching.